Okay, let's try this again. Seems to be having some technical issues for some reason. Didn't seem like it was streaming, so looks like it's doing it now. So apologize for that. Seemed to be having some difficulties. So took me a while to kind of get on, and now it looks like it's actually working. So hopefully we'll be able to get through this. Don't you just love technology? Just always reminded me when I was a teacher and you'd go in and you have this great lesson planned and you go to turn on the interactive whiteboard and the technology was down at the time. So anyway, well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Today we're going to dive into the journal and create more interactivity in the journal. If you've been tuning in to all the different videos, you know that in the journal that I'm working in, I've really been kind of thinking about how things relate, how pages can relate to each other, and so that ends up having a lot of interaction in it. So that's what we're going to kind of continue with today. So let's go ahead and switch over so you can see and I can talk about what you're going to need. So got my journal, and I specifically opened it up to this page because this kind of contains some of the ideas that I'm going to share with you today. That idea of cutting pages and creating different ways that it can interact, and then having foldouts. So there are a couple different ways that we can create these foldouts. So that's really going to make your journal much more interactive. So you're going to, of course, need a journal, and this is something that I am doing in the journal. It doesn't make sense to do it on separate paper unless you're going to put it together in a book or a journal. I have a craft knife. If you don't have a craft knife, you can also use scissors. I have a pencil so that I can draw. I've got some pieces of mixed media paper that's about the same weight as the paper that's in my book. I've got my cutting mat in case I'm going to use my craft knife. I have a ruler just in case I need to do some straight lines. I have my glue stick, and again I like the Oohoo glue stick, and then because we're going to be gluing, I have my scrap paper, my glue paper that I like to use. So anyway, let's go ahead and just start thinking about maybe cutting some pages. So when I'm flipping through, again, I just sort of flip through and I find spaces where I want to work. So it might be up here where I have a lot of stuff going on already, but more likely I'm probably gonna, let's flip back through here, back to pages that I've already started, and it makes more sense maybe to do this where there's not a whole lot going on. So I could start on a new page, or I could start with a page that has some things going on with it. So anyway, so let me just kind of flip through and find a space. This might be interesting because it's just a flat two-page spread right now. Then when I turn it, this was a page that I folded the other day. And so it might be really interesting if a little bit of this showed through on here. So I could cut a straight line or maybe a wavy line or some other kind of line. So I think I'm going to cut a little bit off of the edge, and you could do any, like I said, any kind of line or kind of shape. So you can think about like this starts to shape your paper, your pages. So if I take this, put my cutting mat underneath, I could just cut it with scissors, but I find sometimes it's a little bit easier and quicker to do it with the X-Acto knife. And I think maybe here what I want to do is just start and cut. Now I do have some collage paper on there that I'm cutting through, so I do want to press nice and hard. So I'm doing a wavy line because I've been doing a lot of straight lines and geometric shapes, so this wavy line might be a good way to introduce a little bit of contrast. So then I take that away, and that's a little piece. Maybe I do want to save it and use it as collage later, but now when I move that, you could see I like how that shows through now, and then when I flip it over, that shows through, and so it just kind of creates this interesting interaction like that. So that's something I can do, and I can do that any shape. You may have seen the profile that I had earlier. So I could draw a profile, but maybe facing out, and then the nose comes out this way, and I could cut it and shape the page. So cutting, so that's very simple. Like I said, I could do that with scissors. I could do that with an X-Acto knife. So cutting is something that we can do. And then maybe we want to think about cutting pages where I have like cut it, but then have a flap, a fold out. So I'm looking at this page. Maybe it might be an interesting one, or you know what? Maybe this one. Let's see, where am I? So this one might be interesting because I've got the tunnel. So the other day I was talking about cutting tunnels. So we have that one. So this one, you know, I don't have much going on right now, but I want to go ahead and I want to make a page cut and maybe just cut this straight down in the middle or close to the middle of the page. And so this is where my ruler is going to come in handy. So if I wanted to, I could measure. This paper is about 5.5 inches, so I could go, you know, and sort of measure exactly, but I'm just gonna eyeball it, and I think that's close to the middle. And then I'm going to cut this and hold the ruler nice and steady, and I'm using a metal ruler, or if you have a wooden ruler, make sure it has the little metal edge in it. I would not use a plastic ruler just because the knife can cut into the plastic. Okay, so when I take that away now, I've got this. Okay, so I want this to open up like that. I want that to open up like that. So how do I do that? Well, I need to have something on here, a tab, a flap that's going to allow that to fold open. And that's where this paper is going to come in handy. Okay, so let me move my journal out of the way, and I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. So I have this scrap of paper, and I want it to be as long as my paper that I just cut off. So I could do that on the cutting board. Let's see. So if I just sort of line it up, I could measure, but you know what, it's right here. I can eyeball it and take my ruler. And what I'm going to do is cut a flap or a tab that I can glue on to the piece of paper that I cut. So I got to make sure that came off of there. Just making sure that it's the right way around, like that. Okay. And then this is going to be a flap, and I can fold it, but before I fold it, I do want to make it a little bit thinner. Maybe I want to make it as thin as the ruler, or maybe a little bit thicker. And just be careful with the knife. I have sliced my finger doing it like this with a ruler before, so just be careful. Okay, so now I have that flap. I can just fold it. So I can try to take it and fold it, but what I find is that sometimes it's hard to fold, especially a skinny piece of paper like this. So I do have a secret weapon, if I can find it. So if you have one, awesome. If not, just try to fold it, or you can use something else and score it. So this is a stylus, and it's got little, not a point, it has two little balls at the end. One is bigger. This point's a little bit bigger than this side. Unfortunately with these, sometimes the little one breaks off, but the big one works really well. So I can take this and I can set it down and draw a line. I'm going to score a line all the way through. So by scoring, by pressing down nice and hard, maybe do that a couple times. I don't know if you can see there's a line, but as soon as I start to bend it, the paper folds right on that line. So I weaken that line is basically what I'm doing. So what I'll do is this part will get glued to the piece of paper that I just cut out, and then the other part will get glued on the back of this page. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take my scrap paper, my glue paper, and get all this stuff out of the way. This is where sometimes the glue stick's a little bit clumsy because it's big, but If you have a smaller glue stick, or if you're using Yes Paste is a nice thick paste to use. I'm just trying to get the glue onto the paper and up to the fold, and not really go past the fold. Okay, and then take this, and I want to line up the page part that I cut out with the fold. Now I see I made it just a little bit too long, so I can take my scissors and trim that little bit off the bottom. Okay, then fold the flap underneath. So I could do this two ways. I could take this and glue it to the top of this page, but then it kind of covers up a little bit of this watercolor paint that I have here. If I glue it to the back of it though, I don't have anything back on this side. So I'm going to put the glue on my tab, but I'm going to do it on the inside here. So take my glue paper again, and this time going to put the glue on the inside. So when I put it on the inside of the flap, that's going to allow me to glue it to the back of the page. Okay, and then just rub it until it really sticks. Okay, so now I have basically a little flap that opens and closes, and that's a nice way to kind of create some interaction, and then a nice little surprise, so that way whenever somebody's flipping through it, it's like, oh, check that out, and that opens up, and I could take that same color of paint and paint it and make that tie into the rest of the page. So that's one way to kind of create a fold out, is to create a little tab, and then I'm going to show you another way of doing that. So I've got a bigger piece of paper, and I cut this one on my paper cutter, so it's the exact same size of my book. And I want to cut a piece of this off. I'm going to use my ruler. Now the nice thing about the cutting mats are the grids. So if I take and line my paper on the grid, I can cut a nice parallel line. Now I know that my page in my book is 5.5 inches. So I could go and be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, but that's going to be too big. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and cut it, because I'm going to fold the flap in. So if I cut it for about 5.5, because of the signature, because of the stitching in the book, the pages are not quite 5.5 inches. They're about 5.25 inches. So if I were to take this page and try to make a flap, maybe I'll go back to something earlier in the book, maybe even to something up here, just to find a space that could be kind of interesting to create a flap. Just trying to find. That's the problem, is that when you're working, you have stuff going on. You're like, oh, I don't want to cover that up. Oh, I don't want to cover that part up. Not really finding a spot, so let's go back into here. Okay, so maybe maybe here, this might be kind of an interesting thing. So maybe I want to have a flap that folds out. So right now you could see that this piece of paper is about as big as my page. Okay, so if I were to glue it in, it might get caught up and bent. So I don't like to take up the whole page. I like to have a little bit of a gap here so it has a place to fold. So if I take my flap, I'm gonna actually fold the flap out of here. So I can take my ruler, and again line it up on my grid, and I can do this an inch long. I could do this a half an inch. Maybe I'll do it. Try to do the 1/4 inch. And then I'm just going to score it again, and the scoring is just going to make sure that I have a nice fold. So if you don't have this, you can use a ballpoint pen that no longer has ink. I've seen people use scissors for that, but again, the scoring just allows me to bend the paper and fold it more precisely. And so now I have a flap. So I have that little tab again. Maybe I want to fold it back the other way just to kind of loosen it. And then that way it'll be easier to open and close it. Bring my book back over. And so I'm going to glue this in like this. And so that way it will open and close, and it kind of covers that page. So get my glue paper again, and then put a little bit of glue. And so I'm putting the glue on the inside of the flap. That way it gets glued to the back of the page that I have open. I don't have to do it this way, but I find it's a little bit stronger this way. All right, I want a lot of glue down because sometimes it's hard to get the page in position exactly. So then take this and kind of work kind of quickly, get it into position, push it in, fold it over, and then rub it. So I'm going to rub it for a few moments just to make sure that it's really stuck down. Okay, and so now I have my flap. And then when that closes, now I have something new. So, and then when this opens, now that relates to that. So I might think about, do I want to trace these windows and cut windows through this flap? And then yesterday I drew these, so I had flipped this over and drew those in. So maybe I want to cut the windows through there. Now I have some other stuff on that side, so maybe not. So I can really start to think how this starts to relate to one another. And then again, I've got this little strip here, but I could just take some of this watercolor paint and paint over it, and it's going to blend, and you might not even see it at all. Okay, so that's just a plain page fold out. Okay, so you could just do a plain page cut. You could do a page cut and create a flap by using a separate piece of paper, and this really just makes this look like a solid page. And then I'm going to show you one more technique that where I can again cut a page and use like half of it as a flap, but I'm going to create a gap in between. So it's just a matter, maybe I want to come back, starting to run out of pages, so it's good that I'm kind of getting to the end of all these demonstrations. Okay, so let me see if I can find a space in here. This might be a good space to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to cut a shape out, And so earlier, you know, back here, whenever I started this, I had this open. Okay, so maybe I'm going to do another profile, but maybe what I want to do is have a gap, have a space here. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. So I have my pencil. I can do this really anywhere. I think I'm going to do it about halfway. And I'm just going to draw. It doesn't have to be a profile. This could be like any kind of line. It could be a straight line, but I think curvy lines are a little bit more interesting. And so I like the face idea though, because it really creates a lot of interest, because we like faces as fellow human beings. So it doesn't have to be a perfect profile, and I can always trim it and fix it. But then I'm going to take my, I don't know if you can even see that line, I kind of drew it lightly, but I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, my craft knife, and cut. Again, I could just cut this with scissors. I could just hold it up, but I just find it's a little bit easier and quicker. And if I can cut this in one long stroke, it's going to be a little bit neater. I remember hearing one time from a fellow artist, a ceramic artist actually, a potter. He said that the best marks are ones that are made with confidence. So if you can do it with confidence quickly, your hand doesn't shake or stutter. You don't lift up your knife or your paintbrush or whatever it is. And so now I have my little face. So the idea is that I'm going to create a flap and a fold out so that this folds out this way. And I want a gap. So in the other example, it was right up against there. So I had created a tab, a flap out of another piece of paper. But this time I'm going to use the cutout, and then that's going to be the flap. I'm going to fold it at the edge like I've done before, and that's going to create that gap. So I can do this with my ruler and my stylus. If you don't have a stylus, what I find is sometimes if you just take your ruler and you hold it up, and then, because the problem is that you want this to be pretty straight and pretty parallel, and so if I hold up the ruler and then tuck my fingers underneath it, I can kind of start the fold, and it's very straight and more likely to be parallel to the edge. So again, I have my flap. If I want it to fold easier, fold the flap back. And then, okay. So now I'm just like going to do it like I've done before. And I'm going to glue it to the back again. I could, like I've said, I could put the glue here and glue that down here. But what I find is that as this opens and closes, you can see how like it puts pressure and it wants to pull that off. So if it's underneath, that pressure actually just pulls it up to into the back of the page. So there's less likelihood of it coming off. So take my glue paper and my glue stick. And I think, you know what? I did it. No, I didn't. I was thinking I put it on the wrong side, but I didn't. All right, let's get that in position. Fold that over. Rub it down. And I find I can take my eraser and get rid of those pencil marks. Okay, so now I've got this gap, and the really nice thing is like now this page relates to this page. So as I'm working, I want to keep that in mind. I want to think about what that is and how that does that. So, and then if I wanted to, I could have this fold over this way, and it could relate to that page too. That's the nice thing about the foldouts, is that they can flip over. So anyway, the last thing to kind of think about, let's go back to this one, wherever it was. So this one. So another thing to think about with your cutouts is that it doesn't just have to be a single page. You could do a series. So, maybe I wanted to go and cut one of these other pages. Since I have a wraparound with the collage, I don't think I want to do that. I have a wraparound on both sides. But you could find a series of pages, maybe on my tunnel pages. Maybe I want to cut a little bit off of this page, and then a little bit off of this page, and a little bit off this page, and then they all kind of work together and interact. But anyway, so those are some quick, easy ways to add more interaction into your journal. So think about how you could use that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a profile. It doesn't have to be wavy lines. You could do straight lines. You could do jagged lines, all kind of different lines in there as you're cutting. And you could leave the pieces off and not use them. Or if you cut off a big enough piece, you could create a fold out and create a flap or a tab for it to fold out. You could do lots of different things. I don't know if you're familiar with the pop-up maps. So whenever you travel, especially in big cities, when I was in England this past summer over in London, I got a London pop-up map. And so it's a simple way of folding paper so that you could do that in your journal. And as you open it up, boom, it just sort of unfolds into this like really big piece of paper. And so you could take a small journal like I've been working in and have a bigger piece of paper that folds up into it. So you could really create a lot of interaction and interactivity in your book just with some simple materials. All I needed was some paper. It doesn't have to be mixed media paper. It doesn't have to be the exact same paper. You could just use some drawing paper as long as it's a similar weight and maybe a similar texture. But you could also do it with colored paper, with construction paper, with cardstock. Really anything that you want if you're making those cutouts and those foldouts. So, but it just creates a different feel to your book. So when you're making a book, you can make it any way you want, and then that way you and people that look at it can interact and relate to it in such a different way. So that's just something to kind of think about. So let me go ahead and check and see if anybody has any questions. So if anybody, nope, no questions. So if you have questions, pop them into the comments. If you have suggestions or just comments in general, pop them in there. And please share what you've been doing. So if you've been following along and you've been working, please share. You can tag me. You can tag me in the posts, and that way I can see them. Or you can go to the Journal Fodder Junkies online workshop group, and you can pop them in there. And that way it's a small contained group, and then people can see that. So share what you're doing. Love to see what you're doing if you're taking some of these ideas and working in your journal with them. So and then please share the videos. This is the 7th video in the series. I did have a problem last night, so if you missed it last night, I accidentally recorded it to my personal page, which was still open to the public, but if you're not a friend of mine, then you may not have seen it. I did post it over onto this page, the Eric Scott Art Studio page. So if you haven't seen it, you could just go to the page and scroll down, and it should be like the second or third post on there. So if you missed last night, then check it out. But yeah, so share, let people know about the videos, share what you're doing. And let's see, what else? Seems like I'm forgetting something. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow. So this is Friday. I'm taking the weekend off, and then I'm going to do another live stream Monday morning, and then Tuesday evening. That's what I have scheduled. I might do more. I might continue this. I like this if I can keep the technical issues down. But yeah, so keep tuning in. So if you want to, next time it's going to be tracings and image transfers. That's going to be Monday morning at 10 a.m. So, thanks for getting up. Thanks for joining me this morning, and I really appreciate it. And again, if you ever have any questions, need anything, just post a comment, shoot me an email, message me, whatever. So thank you so much, and enjoy your journaling, and happy creating.